Juicy Joint is a liquid pain relieving supplement where the company that makes it actually says it has some advantages over some over-the-counter pain relieving medications. And to prove its efficacy, the company even now lists about 20 different studies on the ingredients in Juicy Joint to prove it works. I'm going to summarize them here for you so you can get a better idea of what works as well as the pros and cons. And let's begin with horsetail. So this appears to be the basis for the company's claim that Juicy Joint can support collagen production. In one of the studies, they list a high dose of horsetail extract increased jawbone mineral density in young rats. In another rat study, they present horsetail was combined with calcium and vitamin D and vitamin C and other things, but this isn't relevant to Juicy Joint because it doesn't have those other nutrients. In this next study, which is interesting, they found that horsetail extract reduced the development and activity of bone-destroying cells called osteoclasts. And that's really intriguing. However, this was actually a cell culture study, and we're more than just a clump of cells in a petri dish. Now, what this means is that the collagen claim is biologically plausible. However, none of the studies I saw showed that Juicy Joint improved collagen production in people. Next up is Meadowsweet, and one of the studies that the company produces in support of this ingredient is this mouse study where they found that it had modest anti-inflammatory and pain relieving effects. However, this same study also showed that traditional pain medications work better. Next up is turmeric, and I think the research that was presented has a problem. For example, one study they list found that curcumin reduced inflammation and pain sensitivity in mice that had experimentally induced disc herniation. Now, if we set aside the fact this is a mouse study, the curcumin was actually injected into the animals and not taken orally as a supplement. Let's also circle back and remember that Juicy Joint contains turmeric root and not a standardized amount of curcumin. Turmeric and curcumin are not the same thing. Curcumin is one of the curcuminoids in the spice known as turmeric. And that brings us to ginger, which I think has better research for knee osteoarthritis pain. In one of the studies, they show 63% of people receiving a concentrated ginger and galangal extract improved compared to about 50% of those who took placebos. And in this meta-analysis of 5 placebo-controlled trials, oral ginger supplements produced small improvements in knee osteoarthritis pain and disability, and I will call out that the doses here were between 500 and 1,000 milligrams of ginger a day. And then there's this oddball study the company lists, which is a citation involving low back pain that used ginger oil along with Swedish massage. Bottom line, in my opinion, this study isn't relevant to the proof for Juicy Joint unless you're also doing Swedish massage. And I'll also point out this oddball study, which is mentioned on the Juicy Joint website, because if you click on the link, it actually takes you to a study of dry cupping and not ginger. And that brings us to the 2 ingredients in Juicy Joint which I think have the most proof of whether or not this supplement works. Let's talk about them separately. The first one is called Devil's Claw. Devil's Claw may actually help reduce pain because it contains compounds that reduce inflammatory signaling. Here's what I believe is the strongest study the company links to. It's a placebo-controlled trial where people received either 600 or 1,200 milligrams of a Devil's Claw extract. 4 weeks later, 10 of the people who took the higher dose were pain-free without medications compared to just 3 people who took a placebo. The other ingredient I want to call your attention to is called white willow bark. White willow bark contains an ingredient called salicin. Salicin is converted into salicylic acid. This means that salicin works in a somewhat similar way as aspirin does, although I do want to point out that white willow bark is not exactly as simple as natural aspirin. The strongest white willow bark study that they linked to included 210 people with low back flare-ups. These people received either a placebo or extracts that contained either 120 or 240 milligrams of salicin daily. After a month, 39% of the people in the high dose group were pain-free compared to just 21% of the people who took the lower dose. And if you delve deeper into this study, you find that the higher dose that was used contained about 786 milligrams of dry white willow bark extract. One serving of Juicy Joint has 400 milligrams of a proprietary blend that has many ingredients, including white willow bark. I also noticed something else. After looking at the research on the Juicy Joint website, a lot lot of the studies that they're calling attention to pertain to low back pain. Low back pain is not the same thing as knee osteoarthritis or shoulder pain or other types of pain. So several of the ingredients in Juicy Joint do appear to have legitimate biological activity. Because it contains white willow bark and devil's claw, I would not be surprised if people left comments below telling me that Juicy Joint worked for them. Although keep in mind that how well it works would depend on what's causing your pain. Is it possible that all the ingredients in Juicy Joint add up to produce a synergistic effect that's greater than any of the individual ingredients? Absolutely, that is definitely possible, but it's going to take a few good human clinical trials to prove it.